Well, we're here one day before the NFL draft. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. It's always game day in Buffalo. Our producer, Lucas Buckley, doing a great job getting us not only on the audio, but the video version as well. We hope that you've been joining us now that we're on the YouTube channel. Check it all out. In the meantime, Matt, it is just really at our fingertips. We can taste it. We can smell it. The draft a day and a half away from when you and I are talking right now on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, if you're tuning in to listen to this podcast or you're watching this podcast, you probably want draft talk. That's all we've been talking about for really a couple months with my friends, with people at work. Who are the Bills going to draft? What are they going to do? I've said this a couple times. Some people think it's less interesting because they are later in the first round. I think it's more interesting because I think the possibilities are endless on what the Bills could do. They could trade up, they could trade down, they could trade out of the first round completely. Maybe they could make a trade for a star wide receiver in Arizona who has said he wants to play for the Bills. So there's a lot of different outcomes that we could have, and it's all going to kind of come to fruition tomorrow.
Yeah, Thursday night is the first round of the draft. The Bills scheduled to pick number 27. Like you just said, anything can happen. I've been asked a few times, would you rather have them drafted early so you're done? Would you rather have them drafted later? You got to stick around. And I'm like, in my job and our job, Matt, we have to stick around no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, they could draft first overall. They could then you're not done in our business. They could go back into the first round, and fans too, right? I mean, they could trade back in. So it's a long night no matter what. But hey, man, it's the draft and it's pretty cool. And we're all down there kind of being a part of it. And I've always find it to be a really cool night just for everybody to kind of get involved, learn about a lot of these players if you haven't done a lot of research on them, and then maybe follow your own mock drafts and your own mock draft boards and see where it's going. I also like the chaos part of it.
Love it.
It feels like the top of the draft just is still unsettled, right? I mean, I think Bryce Young is going number 1 to the Carolina Panthers, but now there's some rumors based on, of all things, a Reddit post that maybe Will Levis is going number 1. What do the Texans do at number 2? The Cardinals could trade out of number 3. I think it's super cool.
I've been thinking about, I don't want to jump off of this draft, but this morning, something you just brought up was very interesting to me. You said the chaos of all of it.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think back to what this morning was like 5 years ago, the night of the draft when the Bills ended up taking Josh Allen. So that was 5 years ago today. We're recording this on April 26th, the day before the draft. And I just remember that year, all we did was talk about quarterbacks. It's the same thing as kind of what's happening nationally every single year. Like this year, if you turn on any of the big sports networks, if you read any of the big publications or listen to the podcast, they're talking about CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. We were talking about Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Lamar Jackson, and Mason Rudolph. We were talking about all of those guys and all of the different layers to it. So it's just funny because I think back to that day, and it was such a polarizing moment. Like they drafted Josh Allen. And I would think that most people were probably pretty upset with the pick. And it's funny how look at where we are now. One of the best quarterbacks in the NFL 5 years later.
Who was your guy in that draft? Did you have a favorite out of that group?
I loved Darnold. Darnold. But I think Darnold was maybe the most unrealistic for them to ever get. Because I think he was pretty consensus. He would be a top 3 pick. So if Darnold wasn't on the table, I really liked Rosen.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I give Brandon Beane credit because this is something that I saw Matt Miller post about yesterday from ESPN. And he said that he's had a conversation with a first-time GM. He had this conversation like 10 years ago. And he said, for your first-round pick, you need to take somebody who you know is going to come in and be solid and contribute. And there's not a big chance of failure. Brandon Beane in his first draft swung for the fences.
Yep.
He deserves credit for that. Like Josh Allen had the highest ceiling, but also had the lowest floor. But he did not care. That was his first pick as a general manager in the NFL. And he was willing to, be risky. So credit to him.
Yeah, you're right about that. I remember thinking back. I remember in 2017, I was all about Mahomes for that very reason. I actually felt Mahomes had the highest ceiling, but the lowest floor. But we had been stuck in this quarterback purgatory for so long in Buffalo. I'm like, just go after this guy. Go get him. Bring him in. You might as well swing for the fences. Of course, the Bills didn't do that. They made the trade, and it was apparent they're going to take a quarterback in the next draft. I felt Rosen would be the safest, best pro. I did. And I said, okay, that's fine. Go get me Rosen. But I was not upset at all with Josh Allen for that same reason. Hey, they're taking a swing here. Let's see how it works out. And obviously it has worked out. So yeah, happy 5-year anniversary of the Bills drafting Josh Allen and drafting Tremaine Edmonds, by the way.
Yes.
I was thinking about the Tremaine Edmonds pick. Is Tremaine Edmonds a good draft pick?
It's a great draft pick.
I think so too.
It's a great draft pick.
If you had, here's the way I would look at it. Maybe that's a dumb question to ask, but I still think there's people out there. There are Bills fans who say, "Well, Tremaine Edmonds, 5 years later, he's not even on your team anymore, and he didn't do this or he didn't do that." And I think, wait a minute. You go to any GM, any front office member, and say, for your first round pick, you're going to get a 5-year starter on your defense who's going to be in 2 Pro Bowls and help you get to an AFC Championship game, and then make $18 million on the open market per year.
Mhm.
I think that GM would say, "Oh my God, sign me up right now."
I mean, we're going to probably talk about a lot of different positions the Bills could take tomorrow. And if you told me that right now they drafted a guy who would be a multiple Pro Bowler and would be a starter for 5 years, but we knew that they were going to leave, you would sign up for that in a heartbeat. No questions asked.
Yeah, I think that those 2 draft picks turned out exactly the way the Bills wanted. And of course, they were 7-16, right? When they drafted back in 2018, Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. So that
Can I
takes
say
us
one?
into,
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
That's the best Bills draft class of all time.
All time.
All time.
Doesn't beat out 1985.
I think it does.
Have you looked?
A little bit, yeah. So you bring up 1985, and I've got 2018.
All right, ready? 1985. They drafted a guy named Bruce Smith, number 1 overall, who's only the greatest defensive end who's ever played in this league, arguably with Reggie White. Right?
I understand that, yes.
Okay. Hold on. I'm going to put it up now because I believe that was also the year of here we go.
The Bills 2018 draft is very, very impressive.
Listen, dude. They drafted Andre Reed in the 4th round in 85.
Yeah.
They drafted Frank Reich in the 3rd round in 85. They have 2 Hall of Famers and one of the greatest backup quarterbacks who ever lived to help them get to Super Bowls. Get out of here with the greatest draft of all time for the Bills in 18.
Okay. Josh Allen. I'm not saying, listen, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in his career. Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds, multiple Pro Bowler, an awesome player. If he would have stayed in Buffalo, I think my argument is probably stronger. After that, Harrison Phillips, really good career with the Bills, went on to earn a big contract with the Vikings. After that, Taron Johnson, who made one of the biggest plays in franchise history, a really solid player. Saran Neal, who's still with the team, a really solid player. Wyatt Teller, who's one of the best players at his position in the NFL. And then after that, I don't know if
I'll give you the quality of the overall draft. But, man, until you give me 2 Hall of Famers, right, and one of the best and a really good – and plus, Derek Burrows, by the way, he had a bit of an up-and-down career, but Derek Burrows was a solid player for the Bills. Chris Burkett was a very good wide receiver. I mean, I'd say Chris Burkett's on the level at least of a guy like Harrison Phillips, if you want to compare that. But it's great. I mean, I think it's a really good debate. It's really interesting. Maybe we'll throw it out there to people and see. Hey, I'll open the door to this. I'll give you this. Maybe we're talking in 20 years and I give you 2018. But as of right now, it's not there. I'm going to say 85, best Bills draft ever. But that was a very good draft for the Bills.
If the Bills win 1 Super Bowl, if Josh Allen wins 1 Super Bowl, I think it becomes the best draft class ever.
It probably does from that standpoint. So let's just real quick talk about Brandon Beane and his drafts. He was in charge of that 18, and then 19 comes along. They draft Ed Oliver, with their top pick, number 9 overall. Now they're in this situation where you feel like Ed Oliver hasn't really quite lived up to his draft status. He's been very good at times. The 2020 draft, 2021 draft, these things are still playing out. I understand. And there's been a lot of kind of back and forth from some Bills Mafia on just how good Brandon Beane's drafts have been. I think he's hit on some. I think he's missed on some. You know what else I think, Matt? Every single GM hits on some and misses on some. I don't think Brandon Beane's been incredible at drafting by any stretch. I don't also think that Brandon Beane has been terrible at drafting, to be honest with you.
I think that's kind of pretty par for the course. I think you make some really good picks, and I think you make some picks that you wish you could have back, and you make some decisions you wish you could have back. Like we were just talking about the 2018 draft class. They moved on from Wyatt Teller too soon. They probably wish that they could keep.
But he gets credit for the draft pick. He gets discredit for trading him.
Exactly. Like the thing Brandon Beane, and this is why it was so risky, but this is why also he'll always have it in his back pocket. He drafted Josh Allen. So for the rest of his life, that will be the calling card of like, yeah, you took the chance on Josh Allen and it paid off. I think what the Bills have done a good job of are some of those day 3 picks. Like there's guys that Taron Johnson, Saran Neal, Gabe Davis, Tyler Bass, like there's these players who have been taken on day 3 who have come in and made a pretty big impact. The area where I think the Bills need to be better isn't day 1, it's day 2. because some of their day 2 draft picks have not lived up to the expectations. We're talking about guys like Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa, Zach Moss, Cody Ford. They traded up for Cody Ford. Like, the jury is, it's still out on AJ Epinesa, on Boogie Basham, but Zach Moss, that was a miss. Cody Ford, that was a miss.
I think so far, I know that there can be debate on this. I think Greg Rousseau has been a good pick so far.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think the first round picks really, for the most part, have all been good. I mean, you wipe out 2020 because of Stephon Diggs. Yeah, you wipe out the 2020 draft because of Stephon Diggs.
We don't know about Kyrie Elam yet. So far, it hasn't worked out quite the way they want, but I mean,
yeah,
we'll see where that goes. They also did draft Christian Benford in the 6th round of the same draft, right? So, that elevates, what he's done so far. And now he's facing a situation where he's picking at 27, or at least slated to pick there. And we heard from Brandon Beane a couple weeks ago. I asked him about this draft class. How many first round grades you have? He wouldn't be specific, but he said it's not great. Well, Matt, we've talked about this on the podcast before. We're sitting here just a little bit before the draft, a day or so before the draft. The Bills are still at 27. Do you feel like they need to make a move to get that quality? You said you're okay with trading up as long as it's not for giving up, next year's first rounder. Do you feel it's a move that they should be eager to make because they want to get the proper value? Or, hey, unless it really falls to you, don't worry about it. Just stay at 27 or, see how the board falls.
I won't hate it depending on who they take, but I've really warmed up to the idea of moving back and adding another pick on day 2. And that's just been from the last week, from the last time we talked, me sitting on mock draft simulators and reading everything that I can find and seeing kind of how the board shakes out. You almost approach this like you approach a fantasy football draft, where you run these simulations to see, okay, how often is this player available? How often is this player available? And for me, I think the best case scenario for the Bills is that they can get out of this draft with a linebacker and with a wide receiver that can immediately come in and make an impact. Those are the 2 biggest areas where I think this team needs to get better. So the best way for me to do that I think they should be doing that with all of the simulations and the drafts that I've read and stuff, is moving back a little bit, adding a pick, and then getting Jack Campbell or Drew Sanders, and then somebody like Jalen Hyatt or Josh Downs. Like, Josh Downs would be awesome because they really need a slot receiver. You don't want to pick that guy at 27 probably, but if you can move back and you could get him and one of the linebackers, then I think you would be really happy with how this played out. And you would still have, another day 2 pick who you could come in, and maybe that's where you could draft a defensive tackle that isn't something that everybody is really going to be excited about, but something that your team ultimately needs.
Yeah, I think you could say this about a lot of guys, but what you just said, Josh Downs, for example, would be awesome. You could say a lot of guys would be really nice to have. They'd be a lot nicer to have. You can get them at 45 instead of 27, right? If you go down something like that. So I agree with you. I think that on top of that, they only have 6 picks, right? So, I mean, if you could add more picks, the problem is it seems like everybody's in the same boat as the Bills, which is, it's not the greatest top of the first round, but you have some nice 2nd, 3rd round value. So let's try and get more picks there. So I think it becomes a lot harder to trade that. All right, it's always game day in Buffalo. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. Let's tell you where you can find us, as always, in subscribing and on the audio version, iTunes, Spotify, the Odyssey app. We're always here for you. The latest episode drops. And, of course, on my YouTube channel, at Sal Sports on YouTube, we got the video version. You can see Matt. You can see me. And you can always watch previous episodes just like you can listen to them if you're subscribed. Just like our Mike North podcast. It was fabulous. We've had great response, Matt. Loving the fact that so many people have really enjoyed listening to the hour and 20 minutes of Mike North last week.
Also, really happy we put the podcast out when we did,
Yeah,
because we were talking about the Aaron Rodgers news, and then the Aaron Rodgers news dropped 6 hours after the podcast went live. So that's
so everybody knows we were debating if we were going to do it after the draft, and then said, well, let's do it before the draft. And I'm glad we did as well.
Yeah. So in the Aaron, we all knew it was coming. We just didn't know when it was going to come. We didn't know if it was going to come at the draft. We didn't know if it was going to come in the middle of the summer. Well, by the time some of you listen to this, Aaron Rodgers will have been formally introduced to the New York media. That's going on Wednesday afternoon. So yeah, no, the reception has been awesome. I've had so many people try and schedule things out of me the last couple of days. I'm sure it's the same as you.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you know about this matchup? Hey, what do you know about this matchup? And I am just trying to be very, very thank you for listening. I appreciate it. This is my educated guess, but I can't say anything for certain. But I will say, started looking for flights for a couple different places, just poking in a couple different weeks to just see
All right.
how
I
things
like
look.
it. I like it. Now, one of the things that happened, he said on the podcast, we'll get back to the draft talk in a minute. To rewind, though, and we really want people to go listen to it. It's awesome. And if you're a schedule nerd like Matt and I are, and you want to know where the Bills are playing, when they're playing, all the cool stuff that goes into the schedule, the Bills resonating on prime time, Black Friday possibility, Thanksgiving, all that kind of stuff. London, right? That everybody wants to know about London, when they playing. He didn't say, but he did say a lot of times you have to kind of piece together the stadiums in London, like Tottenham Hotspur, and when they're available. So someone in the UK tweeted us and said, hey, I looked at this. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is booked, except really for October 8th and October 15th. I bet you that's when the Bills play in London, one of those days.
I think you would be right.
Yep.
But we got to get there first. Usually, this is another thing that Mike mentioned, that game usually gets announced before the full schedule. So chances are early in May, that game will be announced. And then maybe a week later or 10 days later, whatever it is, the full schedule will be released. So if you're somebody who's looking into going to that game, you'll probably only have to wait another week or so to figure out exactly when it is.
All right, let's talk more about the NFL Draft 2023. Kicks off on Thursday night. Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. It's always game day in Buffalo. Check out the Odyssey Draft Show. I'll be joining Jason Lacanfora and Brian Baldinger Thursday night. The draft show starts at 7 on the Odyssey app and across all Odyssey platforms. They're going to be talking about all the draft picks, bringing people on from different markets when the picks are made. I'm going to join them, Matt, after the Bills pick is made. You're going to be on WKBW TV in Buffalo, breaking it all down as well.
Yeah, this is a fun draft. Like, this is one of the funnest nights of the year for me. And like you said, it's chaotic, but I love that. It's also a lot of sitting around and doing nothing until it becomes chaotic. We're sitting there with a group of, 40 of us watching the draft in the Bills media room. And, it could be pick 20 and we're minding our business and we're going up to get some pizza at the counter, or we're sitting there having a cup of coffee. And then all of a sudden the Bills logo could be on the TV and they could be on the clock. And then you're scrambling like, a chicken with its head cut off. So yeah, it's going to be fun. We've got a draft special at 7:30. And actually one of the people joining us on the draft special is Howard Simon.
All right.
Old pal.
Love it. Love it.
So we're excited about Howard being there. So it'll be fun. The coverage starts at 7:30 and the actual draft is on Channel 7. So it'll be a busy day for us, but a good day for us.
No doubt. And by the way, shout out to Bills PR. They always take care of us as far as food is concerned.
Oh, it's the best spread. The best spread of the year.
And no doubt about it. So just a little, if you're listening to this, Bills PR, we're expecting it. We're needling you to make sure that you keep up that high standard you've set over the years.
Remember the year with the ice cream machine? You remember that?
Ice cream machine. Yes, I do.
It wasn't an ice cream machine. It was just like a standing freezer that was filled with every potential option of ice cream.
We weren't like over at Dairy Queen pouring the twirling it.
We have both been to a lot of stadiums for what we do. Bills, it's top notch as far as the food spread is concerned for games, the practice weeks, and then the draft. Usually, not to make people jealous listening to this, but usually there's a meal on Thursday, there's a meal on Friday, there's a meal on Saturday. So I think last year it was like barbecue, then it was like pizza and wings, then it was like subs and wraps and salads and stuff. So thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
All right, and of course, WGR, we're going to have full local coverage all day, all night Thursday night, all night Friday night, and all day Saturday. And I'll be hopping on there as well throughout all those time periods. All right, the Bills pick number 27. I'm going to read to you some odds that have come out as of Wednesday morning on the Bills' possible first-round pick, okay? This is from – now, there's a lot of different sites that do this. This is the specific one I got most recently. I'm going to use it's from bookies.com. Odds maker Adam Thompson. So there's a lot of these, but this is where this one comes from.
Let me ask you to do this. How many guys are listed for the Bills?
The ones that you can actually bet on the odds here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the field.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to know how many names were going to be around.
7 and then the field. These are the top 7 that are in this, okay? The number 1 odds at plus 450. Guard Osiris Torrance. Osiris Torrance from Florida. How's that hit you?
Meh. If they do it, I'm not going to hate it, but a guard isn't necessarily something that makes me think, oh, wow, this team got significantly. Because I think they're kind of set, at least for right now, at that position. That's like a long-term, this guy starts for us next year, not this guy starts for us right away.
I don't think this is happening. I mean, if I'm setting these odds, I'm not putting a guard up near the top. They just
Mhm.
signed Connor McGovern. They just signed David Edwards. They have Ryan Bates. They have a whole bunch of veteran interior players. This is not a team that's, I think, is going to go out and find a guard in the first round and plug and play. They need guys who can start. So I don't see it
Mhm.
happening. I don't like those odds for him. I would not bet that. I think that's poor value. Number 2 on the list, tight end Dalton Kincaid from Utah
Wow.
at a plus
Okay.
500.
How would you feel about that one? I think I would be
I
pretty okay with
wouldn't
that one.
mind. I mean, he's not he's Mike Gesicki basically, and
Yeah.
that's great, right? But you're not going to get much blocking out of him. And I think the Bills want maybe a little bit more there, but that's okay. I'll say this about Dalton Kincaid: wouldn't hate it because I'm going to put myself in the Bills' shoes where they would probably feel because they feel this about their organization, and generally they're right about this. They'll coach guys up. They'll get him in their strength program. They'll put weight on him. He'll be able to grow as a blocker as he starts off as a pass catcher and that gets more into a well-rounded game.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you would have to trust the coaching staff if you made a pick like that, but obviously the front office is going to trust the coaching staff. It would be another weapon for the offense, and that's what
Mhm.
I've been asking for all along, a weapon for the offense. So, beggars can't be choosers. I can't be sitting here saying it's wide receiver or bust. It could be a wide receiver, it could be a tight end. Heck, it could even be a running back. I don't think it's going to be, but I'm not going to say the sky is falling if it's Bijan Robinson.
All right, so no, well, we'll get to him in a second if it's Bijan. He's on this list actually, but he's below the next 2 guys. The next 2 guys are both wide receivers. So the wide receiver train, as Jeremy White likes to drive it basically in WGR, if you want to call it that, it's been going on for quite a while. You know, I started high on wide receiver. I went off wide receiver for a while. I think I'm back on wide receiver a lot more lately because I think I see a lot of the movement of wide receivers. And now I'm thinking, wait a minute, could this guy be there? So next up, third on these odds, actually tied for second with Dalton Kincaid, is Zay Flowers. And then
Yeah.
right after that, believe it or not, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Is it
Wow.
possible he gets to 27? I just don't think so. What do you think about that possibility? And what would you think about Zay Flowers at 27?
Are the odds based off the 27th pick or the odds based off who the Bills are picking first? Does it specify?
Ooh, it just says Bills first round pick odds. So I guess that means they could trade. And then because if they draft you, if you bet on the player and they traded up
Yes,
and they took him, you would win.
exactly. So that's why, for me, maybe Vegas or those odds makers think that there's a chance the Bills hop up 10 spots or whatever it might take to get Jackson Smith and Jigba. That would be, for me, the best player the Bills could add in this draft. The caveat being, I do not want them to give up a future first round pick. I think that is a non starter. I do not think that player is worth 2 first round picks. But I think he's worth a first and a third if that's what it costs you to ultimately move up and get somebody who could come in and immediately make an impact. We were talking about Josh Downs. He's a player I really, really like in this draft for them because after prime Cole Beasley left, they just didn't get enough production from the slot. And I think he could immediately step in and kind of fill in that role. But Smith and Jigba can do a little bit of everything. So that's why you're not just getting an immediate impact, you're also getting somebody who can run a bigger route tree, who can make a difference on this team for years and years and years.
I mean, he would be fabulous to add. I just don't see it happening. I don't think the Bills are going to trade up to grab him, but maybe because of what Brandon Beane said about the lack of first round grades, maybe they see the value, he starts falling, and they can get into a spot where they can do that without giving up that first round pick. I don't see him giving up next year's first in any scenario, even especially after what he talked about. And he kind of said that that's usually something he's not going to do, but you never know. As far as Zay Flowers is concerned, I am absolutely totally fine with the Bills selecting Zay Flowers if they stay at 27. I don't want them to trade up for him.
Mhm.
They can go down. I don't know if he'll be there. I think that would be proper value for Zay Flowers and the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, he's a name. Him and Jordan Addison are
Yep.
the names that I feel like are always flip flopped of who people have higher, who people have lower, who they think could make an immediate impact. Zay Flowers is not the biggest guy by any stretch, but he makes plays. We've done prospect profiles on a bunch of players leading up to the draft, and we've aired one of them every single night. And a lot of the schools will ask them for video of their players. So we asked Boston College for Zay Flowers video, and you watch it, and the guy's just a playmaker. He just is electric on the field. And I think those are the kind of people the Bills need. So you're going to sense a theme here. I don't, to reiterate, weapons for the offense. There is almost nothing that they could do if they took one of those positions where I would be mad. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, speaking of weapons for the offense, the guy you mentioned a little while ago, next up on the list, by the way, Jackson Smith and Jigba just below Kincaid and Flowers. He's at plus 550. he's tied with Bijan Robinson at plus 550. And then you have a dip. You go to Darnell Washington, the tight end out of Georgia, and Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back out of Alabama, both at plus 750. So how do any of them hit you?
They better not take Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Like, nothing wrong with the player, but if you're going to take a first round running back, it's got to be Bijan Robinson. After that, if you love Jahmyr Gibbs,
what if you
take
traded
him
back and then you?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you love Jahmyr Gibbs, trade back to 40 and take him at 40, but don't take him at 27.
I just don't see the Bills taking it. I just don't see the Bills taking a running back. I just don't. I don't think it's something that they're interested in. I think that the way they structured their team, you have James Cook, you obviously have Damian Harris. So I just don't see it happening. But I know that everybody else wants it to happen. Everybody else has been wanting it to happen for like 3 years.
Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. You have to wonder,
do you believe that? Why have the Bills been tied to these running backs for 3 years? Is it because there's smoke, or is it because people just think the Bills need to add a running back?
I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that unless they draft a first round running back. And then that'll make it pretty obvious that they've spent big time resources on running backs. I mean, James Cook was a second round pick. Zach Moss was a third round pick. Devin Singletary was a third round pick. So they've been looking for a running back for a while now. I really like Damian Harris, but I don't think adding Damian Harris on a 1-year contract means that you are completely out on the running back class in the draft. I don't think those are like the perfect example is with Osiris Torrance. Connor McGovern, to me, makes that feel like it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But Damian Harris does not make it feel like, to me, that running back is off the table. So that's just, I don't, if it's Bijan Robinson, I have a really hard time complaining about getting somebody who is supposed to be this incredible prospect late in the first round to start for you for 5 years. But Jahmyr Gibbs feels like a stretch.
A guy I've really liked through this process, I still do for the Bills. Not at 27 necessarily, but Darnell Washington's on this list. And I do think Darnell Washington has to be considered here as a possible Buffalo Bills pick.
Well, freak athlete. And that's what everybody is saying about Darnell Washington. All of his numbers, all of his scores from the combine are just off of the charts. But is Michael Mayer on this list?
He's not. I mean, now you have the field, right? So I'm sure he would be on there. Jack Campbell's not on there. Drew Sanders isn't on there. Who else am I not? Jordan Addison, as you said, isn't on there. So let's talk about those guys that we don't see on this list. Michael Mayer's not on there. You think he could be there at 27? The word is he's not getting past the Cowboys at 26.
Yeah, that's what I've heard and seen and read from a lot of different people. But if you love him, what's to say you won't move up a pick or two? Like, it's not like moving up a pick, almost like the Kyrie Elam pick last year, where you move up a couple picks to get your guy. I don't really think anybody is complaining if you think that that person could be a big time difference maker. I was having a conversation with somebody last week who's a big Notre Dame football fan, and they were just saying that Michael Mayer is a football player. He immediately comes onto your team and makes you better. Blocking, catching, running routes, he can do everything. So I've warmed up to that idea. If I've warmed up to the idea about tight end in general, this goes back to a podcast we had months ago where you said you thought tight end was more likely than running back. And I was pretty adamant that I disagreed. I very much agree now. I think tight end is certainly more in play than running back is. I won't hate running back, but there's just a lot of guys who could make sense in the first round with Kincaid, with Mayer, with Washington. Like there's a lot of names out there.
All right. And then let's just stick on wide receiver before we move on here for a minute, because there's a lot of polarization of Gabe Davis. And I think this matters here. Right. And I wrote an article at WGR550.com about Gabe Davis. He's a polarizing player to the fan base because he has a high drop rate. But if you really look at the nuances and a lot of things that go into that, he's asked to do more than anything. He has the highest average depth of target in the league, basically. So it's going to be that he's going to have tougher catches to make all the time. Further you go down the field. He's also been one of the most productive wide receivers drafted 4th round or later in NFL history, essentially, with some of his production with touchdowns. He just broke Tyreek Hill's record for that. But over the last 3 years, he has by far and outweighed his particular draft spot and draft for where he was 4th round or later of anybody else at wide receiver over the last 3 years. So I guess what I'm saying to you is this is a guy that, even though there's a lot of people who say, hey, the drops, maybe you want to move on, get a rookie deal in here. Be careful what you wish for. If Gabe Davis isn't on this team, where are you at wide receiver? So does Brandon Beane take a look? And by the way, obviously Davis is going to the last year of his contract. Does Brandon Beane say, I need to keep Gabe Davis around? And then did that affect the draft? Or does he draft someone and then say, maybe I don't need to keep Davis anymore because I have somebody on a rookie deal.
I think Gabe Davis is a really good player. And I went and did a story with Gabe Davis last year before the draft, just about what he does to prepare and how many balls he catches in his driveway with his trainer every single day. Like this
Amazing.
guy wants it really, really bad. And also, Gabe Davis is the best blocker on the Bills as far as their wide receivers are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Like he makes a difference when he's out on the field. There have been some drops that I'm sure he would want back, but from all of the points that you made, where he was drafted, what he's been asked to do, the impact he's made on this team. You can think back to some games. They don't win games without Gabe Davis. They don't win the Colts wildcard game without the massive plays that Gabe Davis made on the sideline. They might not win the game against Miami early in the season against Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he makes that great catch on third down in the end zone to give the Bills the lead after they had fallen behind. That was the game where the power went out and Stephon Diggs caught his first touchdown in that game as a Bill. So that was in 2020. There's a lot of games where he has made difference-making plays. Of course, Kansas City, they lose that game. But come on, look what he did there. So for me, wide receiver in the first round is about two things. It's about one, taking some work off of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and two, giving yourself an insurance policy because Gabe Davis is going to get paid big time dollars by somebody, whether that's the Bills or somebody else. He would have been the number one wide receiver in free agency this past year. I firmly believe that. I think somebody would have paid him more than Jacoby Myers, more than Juju Smith-Schuster, based off of his age and his production. So that's why I still think wide receiver in the first round makes sense, because by also doing that, you make Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs better. So, it checks a lot of boxes.
Beane said he'll get to the, extension stuff after the draft, after he sees where his roster's at, and not with just Gabe, but other people too, and where they have to look longer term. I just don't think it has to be an either or proposition. You can draft a wide receiver on day one, day two, and still extend Gabe, because if not, you might be sitting there. What if that guy doesn't work out? Or even if Stephon Diggs in a year or two just, lose a step or two and he's making big money anyway, then where are you at wide receiver again? You got other guys on 1-year deals. So I don't think it has to be either or, but check it out. Matt did his story last year. I have a piece up at WGR550.com on Gabe Davis. And by the way, great job from the guys at Cover One, Eric Turner specifically. A lot of good analytics data that I included in my story that they put out there that I wanted to share. So they did a really good job. I wanted to recognize them. All right. Yeah. What about, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and you could make the argument that drafting a first-round wide receiver is more reason to give Gabe Davis a new contract, because their contract, we don't know how long the contract would be, but if you had it so they were structured almost concurrently, you would have a cost-controlled player on one contract, you would give Gabe Davis on another contract, and maybe there was only a year or two overlap where you had to figure out how to make the money work. But like, Gabe Davis is going to get paid by somebody. He's been a really productive player for you. It's a risk going into the season and seeing what he does on the last year of his contract. Because if he has a year like he did 2 years ago, he is going to get an astronomical amount of money from some team.
Ed Oliver also going into the last year of his deal. So was Tyler Bass. The Bills actually re-signed him, though, recently to a 4-year extension. All right, what about adding a wide receiver who's already on another team? Sal Capaccio, Matt Bove. It's always game day in Buffalo. The D-Hop train is still riding along with no team, no stop necessarily in sight. We don't know. DeAndre Hopkins. Are you still on that? Do you want that to happen? What would you be willing to give up?
I wanted, I think, more than I did even at the height of the rumor when he was posting the Buffalo Soldier Instagram post. And maybe this is a recency bias thing. Maybe this is a reactionary move to the Jets drafting Aaron Rodgers. Or drafting Aaron Rodgers, the Jets trading for Aaron Rodgers. I just think you look at your division, the Jets got better, the Dolphins got better, the Bills, we don't know. Like, remains to be seen. They lost arguably the best player of their offseason is leaving. Tremaine Edmonds is going elsewhere. I really like the pieces that they added, but I don't know for sure if they're better. DeAndre Hopkins makes you a lot better, and it makes Stephon Diggs better, and it makes Gabe Davis better. So for me, I don't know. If a third-round pick gets it done, I'm okay spending a third-round pick to get DeAndre Hopkins, even with the massive price tag that you have to pay that guy.
All right. There's some odds on players that could be traded during the draft. DeAndre Hopkins is on that list. Austin Eckler was actually higher than him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was actually higher than him. This is one of the books and sites that I saw. And I bring it up because I was at the NFL owners meetings and I heard a few times that DeAndre Hopkins in Kansas City made a lot of sense and that might happen. And then I read maybe they use Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a trade to bring in DeAndre Hopkins. Boy, Bills fans would hate that. They'd hate to see that. But Matt, I think it's possible that the Chiefs are still very much in play for DeAndre Hopkins as well.
That's another reason why you should add him, because not only do you get him, but somebody else doesn't get him. And that's the team that you're trying to chase here. So not only are you making yourself better, you're also not letting them get better, which is an important thing here. I'm not saying you should trade for him just so he doesn't go to Kansas City, but it would be a nice little added bonus if you did make the move.
All right, let me ask
also,
you.
What's the value of Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I mean, what a very late round pick.
Yeah, I don't get that one. Like, he just hasn't been a
But
productive player in the NFL.
if you're a team like the Cardinals and you're making a deal, you might just say, look, I mean, they don't have a ton of expectations this year. They got Murray coming off the ACL. Maybe we can get with this guy. Maybe he can be better in our team than he is on your team. Teams think about that a lot. So I agree with that, but it is something that maybe another team feels like they can work with a little bit. You never know how people felt when a guy was scouted coming out. He was a first round pick at the time. By the way, that's another one. Was that a good pick by the Kansas City Chiefs?
It's hard to say it isn't when you won multiple Super Bowls, but he wasn't even active in the most recent
right?
Super Bowl. So no, it wasn't a good pick. It wasn't a good. It's hard to criticize things that the Chiefs have done because they have been so good. Like, one of the reasons the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year was because of the immediate impact they got from their entire rookie class. So kudos to them. But the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick, no, I don't think it was a good pick.
I don't think so either. I mean, the value, right? We talk about Gabe Davis. I put the Gabe Davis article out. Someone replied to me, what does it matter where he was drafted? It's a production business. Well, of course it matters as far as the return on investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Bills get a great return on investment on a 4th round pick. In the Chiefs case, they're winning Super Bowls anyway. So, hey, whatever. It didn't work out, but they had no return on investment on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, except really maybe his rookie year when he started off so hot. And we saw him run for like over 200 here in Buffalo. But I remember that when he came out and everybody was talking so highly of him. And now he really is a guy that maybe they're thinking of dealing or not having on their team. They're also a team in the mix for a wide receiver as well. That's going to be interesting. Who else in the mix for a wide receiver? Possibly the New England Patriots. The trade goes down between the Jets and the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Packers have jumped over the Patriots by swapping picks with the Jets. And maybe the Packers get a wide receiver before the Patriots. But it's all going to shake out. Picks 13, 14, and 15. What did you think about the Aaron Rodgers deal that went down?
Well, I thought it was inevitable, first and foremost, but I think the Packers did pretty well. Like, the Jets got their guy, and they immediately become a relevant team and a threat in the AFC East and a team that could win a lot of games next season. So I'm not going to knock them on their return. But from the Packers, you got a lot. Like, you got more than you probably anticipated. So I think it's a win for both sides.
Yeah, man, I agree with you. I don't want to crush the Jets like a lot of people have. I can't believe they gave this up. It's a super big risk, but if you're the Jets, you have to make it. You haven't been in the playoffs in 12 stinking years. It's the longest playoff drought in the NFL. We lived that life. What we wouldn't have done here, come on, you telling me in year 12 of the playoff drought for the Bills, if they weren't in the same scenario, you wouldn't say, oh my God, fine, give up next year's second that could become a first to bring me Aaron Rodgers. We have a really good defense. We have good skill position players. Who wouldn't want that to happen? This could blow up in their face. Even if it does, I don't think it's a bad deal at this time for them to make this. They need to make it. But for the Packers to get that first round, most likely pick next year, this is really nice for them. What I like is the Jets didn't give up a first this year. They swapped picks. They went down 2. But I think it's just really nice that they didn't give up this year's first rounder, which is what Joe Douglas really held to and probably why this thing took so long. For the Packers to get what I think is going to be a first round pick next year, very nice job by them. But for the Jets not to give it up this year, I think is good.
Yeah, I think what it equates to is that 65% threshold. Rodgers would have to miss more than 6 games. So unless there's an injury, or actually that's really it. I was going to say, or if the team struggles, but even if the team struggles, you're still going to be trying to go at the end of the season. So I think the Jets are going to be pretty good. Like, I really do. I thought they were good last year. I know their record didn't indicate that, but they played really good games against the Bills. That defense is awesome. The thing that, Aaron Rodgers is going into an offense now that has weapons that he hasn't had in a while. Like, he's had some good weapons with Devontae Adams and with Aaron Jones, but now you're getting guys who are at the beginning of their careers who are ascending. not players who have kind of already reached that point. You're getting Breece Hall, you're getting Garrett Wilson. Like, these are serious play. Alan Lazard is there. Like, Braxton Berrios. Like, they got some good players. Or wait, no,
Right.
Braxton Berrios is in Miami.
But he just signed. Yeah, he was with the Jets. Thank you.
My bad. My bad.
That's all right. Yeah, yeah. Glad you corrected yourself there. It's all good. All right, let's just circle back as we wrap up here to our Mike North interview. Now with the Aaron Rodgers trade. Jets, Bills, primetime week 1.
You know what? I could see it, but for some reason, and this isn't even anything that Mike said, doesn't it feel like Bengals Bills week 1 just makes a lot of sense? Like, the storyline is just like DeMar Hamlin's first game, real game back onto a football field is where everything happens the year before. You know, you've got these two teams. It's a playoff rematch. I just, to me, that has felt like now the game that could possibly be week 1.
Okay, so no Jets, Bills week 1 prime time then, you think?
I don't know.
What are the chances? Like, are you I think it's very high. I think it's very likely they're going to play early season prime time. So week 1, week 2, I think these two teams will match up early in the season in prime time.
You think it'll be in Buffalo or in New York?
Ooh, that's a really good question. You know, the fact that what did they do last year? I'm thinking Rodgers was here in prime time. That wasn't the Jets, though.
Yep.
I'm going to say in New York.
God, that would be a tough setting to go into.
Yeah.
If it was Rodgers' first game on Sunday Night Football in New York, Bills at Jets.
Woo.
What's the line in that game?
I think it would be Bills by like 2.5.
I was going to say Bills 1.5. That would have been my guess for the line. But I mean, heck, they opened the season last year on the road against the Super Bowl champs. So that's the other thing. I know it doesn't matter, but it's almost like flipping a coin where you flip a coin and you get a heads. You're going to think the next one is going to be tails. Like last year, they started the season on the road. So in my head, I'm going, okay, well, they're going to start the season at home this year. Just process of elimination. But obviously, it doesn't work that way.
All right, I'll go first, tell everybody where they can find draft stuff. Then you go after that. We'll let everybody know where they can find all of our draft stuff from both of us on different platforms. I'm going to be on WGR Sports Radio 550, obviously throughout the night, Thursday night, Friday night as well, and then all day Saturday, in and out when the Bills make picks and, you know, hearing from players after they pick them. And also, don't forget the Odyssey Draft Show on all of the Odyssey platforms. I'll be joining Brian Baldinger and Jason Lacanfora right after the Bills pick, but that show goes starting at 7 o'clock Thursday night on all Odyssey platforms. How about you, Matt?
All right. Thank you. I'm going to be tuned in for a lot of that. I've got big plans tomorrow to cut my lawn while listening to WGR all day for an hour and a half just to get myself ready. I should have probably mentioned this earlier. I'm actually talking to Brandon Beane live tomorrow night.
Wow, there you go. Well, tomorrow night, just so everybody knows, when you say tomorrow night, you mean
the night of the draft.
Correct.
Just before the draft starts, we will be talking to Brandon Beane. We've got a special edition of Leading the Charge on Channel 7. It's on all our platforms as well. You can stream it. You can watch it on your phone. You can do all that jazz. That's at 7:30. And yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff planned, so we're excited. And the draft itself is on Channel 7. So if you're in Buffalo and you're listening to this, turn on Channel 7 tomorrow at 7:30. We appreciate it.
I will see you Thursday night down at the Bills Media Room. We'll enjoy several hours together, pal.
We will enjoy several hours together, and we'll also make sure that we get some sort of podcast up, whether it's after day 1 or after day 2. Like, we're going to be talking about it, so we'll make sure that we keep you guys all.
Thank you for reminding me and telling
you do that content. Yeah, we'll get you that content.
We'll be doing this. You and I, besides you being you on Channel 7, me being me on WGR, we're going to get together and do a lot of this stuff so people can hear us and our immediate reactions, you know, after the draft and after the picks and things like that. So we'll do something that night for sure. It's going to be a long night. You make sure. I mean, I know that we're lucky enough to have families and spouses that support the fact that we're going to be away. So, you know, give your lovely newborn a kiss and say, I'll see you in many, many hours after the draft.
Well, so I will. And I don't know if you've heard her, but Ellie is in the background crying a little bit
I haven't.
right now. Okay, well, that's good. This is a good microphone. So thanks, WGR. So Thursday is supposed to be the best day of the week. So I have always loved the idea of golfing before the draft. Like, it's very therapeutic to me. It's very calming. I know I'm going to have a crazy day, but then you've got the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder. angel is like whispering in my ear, you're leaving your 6-week-old baby at home with your wife already for 10 and a half, 11 hours to
Mhm.
work. You probably shouldn't take an extra 4 hours to go golfing. So I don't think I'm going to get around to golfing on Thursday morning.
Well, this will be concluded. We're going to have to hear how this all wraps up, and you can hear that on our next podcast. Enjoy the draft, everyone. Thanks for downloading, subscribing. Please do so. iTunes, Spotify, the Odyssey app. Don't forget the YouTube channel at Sal Sports. But on our podcast, give us a nice rating, a review. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot for joining us again today, and it's always game day in Buffalo.